Tumama ba ang mga nagdaang survey sa resulta ng halalan? Kausapin po natin ngayon via Zoom. Pulse Asia Research President Ronald Holmes. Professor, magandang umaga po sa inyo. Maraming salamat po sa oras. I think
Good
you're on
morning,
mute,
Pinky.
sir. Ayan, I can hear you now. Sir, how was the result? Yung resulta po ng halalan that we're seeing right now compared to the last survey of Pulse Asia?
Well, the last survey of Pulse Asia that was done April 2024, medyo off siya with regard to the standing of, let's say, Kiko Pangilinan, who was out of contention in the April survey, even with regard to former Senator Bamakino, who is right now, I think, number two in the unofficial results, although he was in contention, although he was in the bottom half. And then the other thing is that in the bottom half, there were a number of Alianza candidates who have now slid to become out of contention, I think from about 13 or 14 position. We also had Ben Tulfo in contention in the April survey. But as we noted, I think when we were talking, Pinky, we saw continuous decline in terms of Ben Tulfo's number, Erwin Tulfo's number. Basically, everyone declined in the April survey.
But
And
Professor, remember when we were
yeah,
talking about it, everyone was on a decline except
yep,
Senator Bongo.
except Senator
Yeah.
Bongo and Benher Abalos marginal lang yung increase. No? So, but everyone declined. Uh, to the extent that really that the bottom half was really something that was an open field.
Yeah. You know,
Yep.
actually, when looking back at our interview, you were also always saying that maglalaro pa ito. Pero, medyo safe si number 1 to number 5. Babalikan ko lang po yung survey ng Pulse
Yep.
Asia, April 20 to 24. No, I have it with me right now. So Bongo, it's number 1, and it appears from the unofficial count, he's still number 1. Si Erwin Tulfo, we talked about this. Malaki po yung binaba niya eh. But
Yep.
sa official account, nasa number 6 po siya. Okay. Tito Soto, also, malaki din po ang binaba. Number 3 po siya sa inyo. Dito po sa lumalabas na unofficial number 7. Ito po yung iba eh, yung Bong Revilla. Nasa
Yep.
number 5 to 8 dun sa Pulse Asia. And right now, he's not even in the top 12.
Yep.
What could have
Yeah.
happened to him?
That we really don't know. No, thinking one of the unknown things really after the actual results are released, then we can compare it with the April survey and break it down by region. That's the only breakdown that we can do and see what the variance is in terms of voting support in each of the regions. There you will see where they drew more support from, at least on May 12. Of course, the other question is what did they do or fail to do in the last 3 weeks that failed, whether they failed to protect their votes in regions where they were generating support or failed to mobilize votes in regions where they were not in any way
Yeah.
strong,
It,
as indicated in the April survey.
it would be very interesting to find out how they ranked in, let's say, for example, Luzon, NCR, yung balance of Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Balikan ko lang, Prof, no? So,
Yeah, yeah.
after Senator Ping Lacson, meron po yung Tulfo, which you mentioned a while ago. Isa-isahin ko na po ito. Kasi sa Pulse Asia po, ang tinitingnan po dito yung top 14 because yung top 14 po maglalaro yan between 11 to 18. So, it's Tulfo, Lito Lapid, he's in. Abby Binay, who's not in, tanggal po siya. Pia Cayetano in. Willie Revillame, pasok din po sa inyo, pero tanggal po siya sa unofficial results. Manny Pacquiao also in, and in the unofficial results, he's out. Ito po, Bam Aquino. Bam Aquino, a big surprise, it appears even to him, and maybe his team, they were saying that, they were hoping they would be part of the Magic 12, but he's number 2.
Yep, yep. And I think it's a pleasant surprise, not only for him, but for the people who support him. So the other question that really, Pinky, is that what did the candidates do or fail to do in the last 3 weeks? Because our survey was completed on April 24. So that's the other question, and that's a question probably that we can get the responses to from the candidates
Apo.
themselves. Who, from former Senator Bambakino, I listened to the press conference of former Senator Kiko Pangilinan. It's not just basically him. Sharon and all of the siblings were also involved. So they did a intensive barnstorming in the last 3 weeks. He was endorsed by a number of local politicians. We don't know whether that translated to support. As I said, when we get the actual results, official results, and break this down by region, then we can more or less put it side by side with the April result and see where the differences are. But that's just one thing. The other thing would really be, well, independently, that this result leads us to really do our own review of our own sampling, our own methodology.
Was it very surprising for you? Looking back at maybe
Um,
the national elections, the past one, and the midterm elections prior to that, ito ho ba yung survey ninyo, the last survey that Pulse Asia conducted, that was quite different from the actual result?
it's the most different. I mean, it's a most there's a greater variance relative to the actual result. Um, we we were expecting it. Honestly, the results really were quite wild. No? Earlier, we are talking about really the Bilyonaryo. In the last three surveys, he went down by at least 7 percentage points from survey to survey. So the slide was something that you could expect. But of course, my own fearless forecast, I mentioned this yesterday to in one interview, was 7 in Alianza at the minimum. That turns out to be just 6. No, I said maybe 3 to 4 from the PDP and 2 people who may come from other groups, both
Yeah.
independent, including BAM and Kiko. So I was off with regard to the Alianza, overestimated their strength. But
Yeah.
that might be also, if the function, that might also be a result of really the inability of the administration to mobilize support, given that the political capital of the president has also dissipated.
It's
So
affected,
there are
you believe it's affected the chances of his candidates?
it affected the capacity of the administration to mobilize support. Because, if your political capital is weak, if people are disapproving or distrusting of the president, the machinery would not be able to generate that support, regardless of the resources that they pour out, because they would be basically, they would not appreciate what the administration would do. They will get whatever resources there are. But vote for those that they feel should not are in a better position to act on their concerns rather than those who are part of the administration that has failed to address those concerns.
If we were to look at the rankings again from the last time, at least you have one person here who made it to number 6, who was out of the Pulse Asia survey. This is Congressman Rodante Marcoleta. He was at 14 to 19. But
Yeah.
14 to 19, and what we're seeing now, again, is a number 6 standing of Congressman Rodante Marcoleta. Sabi mo nga, Professor, no, this is the time really to look into, to analyze better the last, at
Mhm.
least the last survey of Pulse Asia. But when you saw these names and the rankings, what came into mind?
Well, what came into honestly, what came into mind is to look for an explanation. uh, because as a political scientist, I would expect everything that's possible, no? But again, we're looking at machinery in the part of the administration, the ground campaign on the part of the Dutertes, uh, whatever strategies were being implemented, the endorsement of the INC, for
Right.
example. There are many things, but even the endorsement with the INC would not explain why Marcoleta is in number 6, right? You're not talking about a large group here. You're talking maybe at most, some would say 2 million. We would say about 1.5 million. But that would not be sufficient to get you to number 6 unless the turnout rate is low and the share of votes of Marcoleta was sufficient to put him in number 6. I don't know the current figures. Pinky, I've not checked this morning. I've not slept since last night. But
Tuloy-tuloy ata interview sa inyo. Yeah. I mean,
pinag-aaralan eh. But the thing is that, yun,
is it,
the first thing that came to mind was, what's the explanation?
Was it quite, tama ho bang sabihin na mind-boggling po sa inyo yung mga ibang lumabas na pangalan or at least their ranking?
The ranking and the support for some would be things that require an explanation. And to me, as a social scientist, I would look for that explanation. I would not rest with what we had in April because that's a little bit far from election day. But definitely, it's the first time that whatever, because this is the farthest I think that we've had prior to election, it's the least the variance between our last survey and the actual results as it turns out right now is the biggest one that we've seen in all of our surveys across the last 26 years.
Wow. Also, Professor, important to note here is that as we've been reporting here in the Bilyonaryo News Channel and even in other outlets, is that you have that Gen Z and that millennial vote. I'm just thinking, is this something that came into mind that possibly during um, the sampling of the different, for example, Pulse Asia, na baka hindi masyadong natap? Because you're looking at how many respondents really out of 68 million voters, no? It's at 60%. The Gen Z and the millennial vote is actually 6 out of 10 voters. It's that
Yeah,
big. Do you think
yeah,
that possibly
61%.
hindi sila masyado natap during your surveys?
I would not say so. And then the other thing that I would say is that it's not necessarily a monolithic group, Pinky. Uh, you might have a large proportion of the youth basically favoring particular candidates. But you may also have almost a similar proportion of the youth who may go for other candidates. So, but of course, again, the problem that we have here, this one we cannot compare because the Comelec doesn't have actual result based on age. Uh, Sana kung meron eh. Then
Wala
we
po
can
yun.
compare
Yeah.
based on the surveys that we were off on the 18 to 24 age group, no? Yung tinatawag na Gen Z or Gen Alpha or what have you. Pero wala kang datos nun sa Comelec. Eh. We don't have that data from the Comelec. But that's one of the things that we will review. Basically, we do get low refusal rate. We are able to interview people from the 18 to 44. That's the age group that has 61% of the voting population. But I would not say that to think of them as the supportive simply of the liberal opposition. They're quite divided also. And maybe what happened was that the voting right now became a bit more polarized. There's an anti-administration vote among the young, and some of them were for the liberal opposition, and some of them were for, let's say, the PDP.
Interesting to find out eventually, of course, Professor, once you begin to really analyze the data and even, of course, the voter turnout. Because as we were
Yep.
saying, and as we've talked about in the past, normally in midterm elections, mas mababa po yung voter turnout as compared to a national election. At 68
Yeah.
million plus votes, it's really also interesting to find out ilang pong porsyento ang bumoto because to compare it to the 2019 midterm elections, the turnout then was about 75.9, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Almost lagay na po na
76.
76%, tama po. So
Yeah,
maganda pong
yeah.
malaman din this time around, tumaas pa po kaya sa 76% yung voter turnout kahapon.
Yeah, we'll find out from the Comelec. It's hard to, well, you can extrapolate. Right now, you have about, I think, 80% of the election returns in, and the top candidate, as some people would say, someone alerted me, you extrapolate more based on the top candidate who's getting about 21 million. But I don't have the mind right now to do the extrapolation.
Yeah.
But I wait for the turnout. Because if the turnout is low, because Pinky, one of the things that we've done, at least in the reports that we give to our subscribers, we feel that the minimum number of votes to win based on the 2019 results and the 2025 would be 16 million. But if you look at the results right now, of course, there's still 20% remaining. The people, the 12th position is not getting 16 million. They're getting what, 11 million? The last time I checked.
10.7, yeah.
Yeah, so 11 million. So that means that either the voting has become more dispersed. What we found out in our survey is confirmed that the fill-up rate is low. And the other explanation probably for the difference right now is that people who had low fill-up rates eventually decided, I will vote for these other candidates. And that might explain the surge for, let's say, Kiko or Bam or Rodante Marcoleta.
Professor, just a follow-up on that, just quickly. Now, Ray has also some questions for you. Posible ho kaya talaga, just right now, not being conclusive, of course, because you have to analyze the data. Do you think there was a lot of undervoting?
I would say that there is, because the fill-up rate that we've been getting, at least the one in April, we saw a decline across all areas. That in Metro Manila, for example, I think it was down from 9 to 8. In the balance of Luzon, it was down from 7 to 6. In Mindanao, it was also, in Visayas Mindanao, it went down from 10 to 9.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we saw that in April. Now, the other thing that we cannot in any way rule out is that those fill-up rates may have actually increased, because we do have a question in the survey where we ask people, what is the possibility that the number of candidates that you will vote for will change, or that your current vote will change? The large proportion, majority, are saying it will change and it will probably increase. So that's a majority of those who express a preference. Magbabago pa yung kanilang desisyon at maaring dumami ang kanilang iboboto.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that doesn't mean that they will get to 12.
Yeah, or that it actually happened. Pero ano ho
That it
ba,
actually happened.
when you look at numbers, siguro mabuting sa inyo na po manggaling, ano ho bang epekto ng undervoting? Let's just put it at, let's say somebody decides to just vote for 6 out of the 12 senatorial candidates. Ano ho ang ibig sabihin nun? Ano po ang epekto nun doon sa ibang mga kandidato? Is it a +1 for all those 6 that you voted, obviously, and a minus for the other 6 that you did not vote for?
Let's put it this way, para mas practical yung application. Pag tinanggal mo sa equation sa pagboto mo yung mga nasa alyansa, babaksak ang numero nila. Tapos kung ang dinagdag nila ay ang binoboto nila ay hindi alyansa, tataas yung mga hindi alyansa. So ganun ang mangyayari. It's minus for those who are in the alliance. It's plus for those who are not associated with the alliance. And I don't preclude the possibility that there's effective junking happening, at least for those in the PDP, no? But it did not work because they were unable to get at least, well, they were unable to get Ipe Salvador. But I think that's the reason why they added Camille Villar and Amy Marcos as guests. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Professor, si Ray po may tanong po sa inyo. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, good morning po, Professor Holmes. Maybe add some points. To what extent now should the public rely on survey as reflection of the national sentiments?
Well, I think it should still be a good barometer of the national sentiment. But as we always say, it's a snapshot of a particular point in time, and it may change beyond that point in time.
Yeah, paano po natin ma-ensure ang integrity at ang representative ng yung sampling methodology na gamit po ninyo, the system?
Well, yun yung tinitingnan namin, no? Ray, maaari namin tingnan yung metodolohiya, kung meron bang kakulangan, batay sa mga nangyayaring kaganapan ngayon, batay doon sa kalakihan ng isang grupo. Pero yun, maaari ang aming sasagawa doon ay meron kami mga independyente, mga akademiko na maaaring tumingin doon. Di ko alam kung kailan gagawin yun, pero dapat gawin yun sa bahagi namin. No? I cannot speak of the other survey organizations. But I can assure you that there is integrity in terms of the methodology. There may be, surveys are not necessarily perfect. There is that's why there's a confidence interval. When we say 95%, 5% of the time, the surveys may be off. So if you conduct survey 100 times, in 5 times, the results may actually be a little bit weird. But it doesn't mean that puts into question the integrity of the methodology.
Yeah, Prof, matanong ko lang po ito. yeah, with all due respect, paano po niyo tinutugunan ng Pulse Asia po ang allegation of bias or partisanship?
Well, basically, we're a non-partisan, non-profit, non-stock corporation. We do not get our personal views into the survey in interpreting the survey result. We just report the results, whether we agree or do not agree with it. People who know me better would know what my politics is, and they will know that my politics doesn't get mixed up with results that most often than not, I do not agree with.
Yeah, meron ba tayong mga na-observe na any noticeable shift sa voter behavior since 2016?
I cannot recall really. I'm pretty sure that there's a noticeable shift in terms of voting behavior. But at this stage, Kare, hindi ko masabi. Maaaring malaman natin yan, maaaring pag-aralan, pero sa kasalukuyan, at the top of my head right now, top of mind, I don't recall any significant shift. Because if you look at the voting patterns, basically, if you look at who's winning at both the local and national level, essentially it's the same people. No, of course there are happy occasions wherein people vote for other candidates who are not entrenched in local politics, and that makes us happy. There are occasions when there are changes in voting disposition that can lead people to say may survey error. But if the change that happened is for the better, then we'll be happy even if people say that there's a survey error.
All right. One last na lamang po sa aking part. Anong mensahe po ang pwede nating maibigay, may convey doon sa mga candidates who underperform in the survey but nag-perform naman ng well sa polls?
Man, ibig sabihin, the polls are actually a good guide for candidates. We break it down by area, we break it down by socioeconomic class, by age group. It's a matter for them to respond to those, no? And to adopt strategies that will draw support from those areas that they're weak in, and to mobilize support protect the support from areas that they actually have more support. Lahat sila naman nakakuha niyan eh. Makikita nila yan sa aming mga media releases. So kung malakas ka sa Mindanao, sa Visayas, sa Balance of Luzon, ang dapat doon, tutukan mo yung area na medyo may kainahan ka, proteksyonan mo yung area na medyo may kalakasan ka.
All right, Pulse Asia Research President, Professor Ronald Holmes. Professor, thanks so much for taking our call, our invite for a Zoom interview. And we'd like to speak to you again, Sana, once you get more details on this and a little bit more analysis and study on this recent election. Pag-usapan po natin.
Pag-aaralan muli. Maraming salamat, Pinky.
Thank you, sir.